Okay, so it's December, and you know what that means, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Advent, it's everywhere.
Like, you can't escape it. It's pretty much taken over everywhere you look. I mean, twinkling lights and all that festive stuff and those advent calendars.
Right, but beneath all that surface level cheer, have you ever, stopped to think about, the real meaning behind it? Like the history of Advent?
Yeah. Like, it's more than just chocolate and countdowns, right?
Exactly. So that's what we're going to dive into today.
Right.
Some fascinating excerpts from pasted text. You shared this with us.
Yeah, we're going to kind of unpack the whole thing.
Yeah, kind of like a deep dive into the origins and the symbolism of Advent.
Mm-hmm.
And, it might surprise you to know that this time of year wasn't always about, feasting and parties.
Yeah.
Actually, it was quite the opposite originally.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
It's true. Advent actually has this really rich history that kind of gets lost, amidst all the modern celebrations. But when you boil it all down, Advent is a period of spiritual preparation.
Yeah.
It's all about anticipation of Christmas, and it starts 4 Sundays before the actual day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that anticipation part is key, isn't it?
Totally.
Even the word Advent itself points to that.
Exactly. Yeah. You go back to the Latin root of the word adventus, which means arrival.
Okay.
So you can see how from the very beginning, this whole season has been about getting ready for something big, something transformative. And it's not even just about presents and parties, it's also about reflecting on the deeper meaning of Christmas.
I see what you mean. And speaking of symbolism, we've got to talk about the Advent wreath, right?
Oh, yeah.
What do those circular evergreen branches actually symbolize? Because I think we see them everywhere, but I don't know if we actually know what they mean.
It's actually pretty profound. The circular shape of the wreath symbolizes eternity, the never-ending cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And it's a reminder that even in the depths of winter, when everything seems kind of dead and dormant, there's this promise of renewal. There's hope. Okay.
And the evergreen branches themselves, they represent that hope. It's this idea that life can persevere, even in the face of hardship.
So even something as seemingly simple as an Advent wreath has all these layers of meaning.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so what about the candles?
Oh,
Each one has a different theme, but I've always wondered, is there more to it than that, or is that pretty much it?
Yeah, there's definitely more to it.
Okay.
So they each represent a different virtue or aspect of the season. Hope, peace, joy, and love. And originally this tradition started with the Protestants, but it's actually become universal. People from all walks of life, they've adopted it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool how that's evolved.
I think that's what I find so fascinating about Advent, On the surface, it's this pretty straightforward tradition, but once you kind of dig a little deeper, you uncover all these layers of meaning.
Yeah.
The symbolism, and they connect to something much larger than ourselves.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
you know what? That's what makes it so relevant.
Hold on.
Even today.
It's about connecting to those deeper human experiences. Anticipation, hope, and reflection. Those kind of transcend any particular time or place.
I see what you mean. Okay, so we've talked about the meaning of Advent and the symbolism behind the wreath and the candles. But I think it's time to dive into some of the more surprising aspects of this season, right?
Yeah.
The hidden history.
Let's do it.
So, what can you tell us about Advent's past that might surprise our listeners?
Okay, well, let's start with Advent calendars, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you mentioned them earlier, the ones with all the chocolate or little gifts behind each door. Well, they're such a big part of how we celebrate Advent today, but the origin is actually pretty humble.
Oh, I love Advent calendars,
Yeah.
especially the ones filled with chocolate. But I have a feeling that those weren't always around.
Yeah, you're right. Back in the 19th century, way before mass production, people would literally use chalk to mark the days.
Chalk.
Yeah, can you imagine that? Just
Yeah.
a simple line on the door.
Wow.
And every day, you wipe away a section to mark the day passing.
That's so different from the elaborate ones we have today. I can't even imagine a kid being okay with wiping away chalk instead of getting chocolate.
Yeah.
It just shows how much things have evolved over time,
Yeah, absolutely. And the first printed Advent calendar, which is closer to what we know today, didn't even appear until 1908.
Oh, wow.
And it was created by a German printer named Gerhard Lang. It's amazing to think about how something that started so simply could become such a huge global thing.
So from chalk lines to chocolate-filled extravaganzas, Advent calendars have come a long way.
Totally.
Okay, speaking of surprising evolutions, what about the colors we associate with Advent? Purple and pink. I mean, they're very pretty. But is there a deeper meaning behind those choices?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The colors are way more than just decorations. So purple, which is the main Advent color, actually represents penance
Okay.
and preparation. It's like a time for introspection. You acknowledge your shortcomings and you're looking for forgiveness.
That's interesting because when I think of penance, I think of something, well, serious and somber. But then the pink candle kind of lightens things up, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think it appears on the third Sunday.
The pink candle symbolizes joy, right?
Yeah.
And anticipation for Christ's birth. It's this little reminder that even when you're reflecting and looking inward, there's still room for joy and celebration.
Okay. So it's like this balance between those two energies.
Yeah.
The solemnity of preparing yourself,
Yeah.
but also the anticipation and the joy. Like they can coexist.
Exactly. And it's worth pointing out that different regions, they have their own versions of the Advent colors.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for example, in Scandinavian countries, you'll often see white or red candles.
Okay.
They symbolize purity and light and warmth, which makes sense because the winters are long and dark there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's cool how these different cultures add their own perspectives to these traditions.
Yeah.
It just adds so much more to the whole experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've gone from chalk lines to chocolate, from purple to pink, from penance to joy. What other surprises are there when it comes to Advent?
Okay, get ready for this one because it might kind of challenge your perception of the season. Remember earlier when we said that Advent wasn't always about festive cheer? Well, back in the Middle Ages, it was actually a period of strict fasting.
Wait, fasting, like no holiday treats or feasting.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty different from how we experience it now.
It is. People would avoid meat, dairy, even any kind of worldly pleasures. It was a way to prepare themselves spiritually
Wow.
for the arrival of Christ. A time for simplicity, self-discipline, inner reflection.
Wow, it's like a completely different season. But it makes sense when you think about the deeper meaning, right? It's
Yeah.
not just about the external celebrations, but the internal preparation.
Exactly. And while the really strict fasting isn't so common these days, you can still see bits of it in some cultures.
Interesting.
For example, some people still have a meatless Christmas Eve dinner. It's kind of cool how these ancient customs still influence us today.
Yeah, it really is. It's like these echoes of the past that are still with us, even if we don't realize it. Okay, I'm ready for another one of these Advent secrets.
All right, so picture this. It's the Middle Ages, Advent is happening, but instead of shopping or decorating, people are gathering to watch Advent plays.
Advent plays, like actual theater.
Yeah. They were inspired by stories from the Bible and often depicted scenes like, the prophet Isaiah foretelling the coming of the Messiah, or the angel Gabriel telling Mary she would give birth, or Mary and Joseph's trip to Bethlehem. It was a really engaging way for people to experience the Christmas story, in a very communal way.
It's amazing to think about how those plays have evolved. Do you see any connection between those early performances and how we celebrate Christmas today?
Oh, absolutely. You know how we have Christmas pageants and nativity scenes in churches and schools? You can trace all of that back to those medieval Advent plays. It shows how storytelling and performance have always been a big part of how we celebrate.
Yeah, and connect with these really important events. It's like those plays were a bridge between the biblical stories and the lives of the people. Okay, keep them coming. I am loving these Advent secrets. What else have you got?
Okay, so have you ever heard of rorates?
Rorates. That sounds, intriguing. What is that?
They're these early morning masses held at dawn during Advent, and they're often only lit by candlelight.
Oh, wow.
And the name itself is really cool. It comes from the Latin phrase, rorate coeli de super, which means drop down ye heavens from above.
It sounds so atmospheric. I can just imagine it, that soft candlelight, quiet prayers.
It's truly a unique experience, and they often have these ancient Czech hymns that really create a contemplative and profound atmosphere.
It's like you're stepping back in time and experiencing Advent in a totally different way from our modern lives.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that even with all the preparations and celebrations, the real heart of Advent is that inner stillness, that quiet anticipation.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about wreaths, calendars, colors, fasting, plays, even these dawn services. What other Advent secrets are up your sleeve?
All right, well, no deep dive into Advent would be complete without talking about the star.
The star. It's hard to miss it. And it represents the Bethlehem star that led the wise men to Jesus, right?
Yes, that's the traditional way of thinking about it. But there's also a deeper, more symbolic meaning.
Okay.
So in some traditions, each of the 4 Advent candles actually represent a different part of the Christmas story.
Oh, wow.
So the prophets who predicted the coming of the Messiah, Mary and Joseph's journey to Bethlehem, the shepherds who are the first to see baby Jesus, and the angels who announced the good news.
Okay.
And then on Christmas Eve, the star appears,
Okay.
which signifies the journey is complete and the arrival of the Messiah.
That's beautiful. I never knew that. It makes the tradition of lighting the candles even more meaningful. Like each one is a step on the path to Christmas, and the star represents the end of the journey.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to visualize that spiritual journey.
Yeah.
So there's way more to Advent than meets the eye. It's a season full of history, symbolism, and these hidden meanings that still resonate with us today.
I'm blown away by how much I've learned. We've really gone beyond the surface of Advent. But what about Advent today in the modern world? I mean, it's got to be hard to maintain that feeling of anticipation and reflection with all the holiday craziness going on.
It's definitely a challenge, right?
Yeah.
The modern world can make it really hard to find that quiet reflection that Advent is all about. But even with the lights, the Christmas markets, the carols, and all the holiday treats, it's even more important to remember the real meaning of this season: hope, peace, and love.
So how do we do that? Reconnect with that deeper meaning when everything is so chaotic. That's got to be something that a lot of people struggle with.
That's a great question, and it's definitely something we should talk about more.
Okay.
But for now, I'll leave you with this. How can you bring that spirit of Advent, the anticipation, the reflection, that connection to something bigger into your own holiday celebrations? It's something to think about.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
As we continue to explore this together.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. Like trying to embrace that deeper meaning while still enjoying the fun stuff, like finding that balance.
Yeah, you got it. I think that's why this conversation is so important. You know, it's easy to get caught up in all the holiday stuff, the shopping, decorating, parties. But Advent, it's like it's asking us to slow down and really think about what's important.
Yeah, it's so easy to get swept away in all that excitement.
Yeah.
So it's not about ignoring all the fun, right?
No, not at all.
It's more about finding a way to combine that fun with a sense of, deeper meaning.
Yeah, finding that sweet spot, right? Where tradition meets meaning. And it's interesting, even those traditions that seem, well, less religious, like the more secular ones, they can also offer a chance for reflection if we just shift our perspective a little.
Okay, I'm listening. Give me an example.
Okay, we'll take Christmas markets, for example.
Okay.
On the surface, they're all about festive food and twinkling lights and, finding unique gifts. But when you think about it, they're also a way for people to come together and celebrate. It's about connecting with people you love and experiencing the joy of giving.
I see what you mean. Like those markets capture a little bit of that Advent spirit, the anticipation, the togetherness, the generosity.
Exactly.
Speaking of generosity, those Advent calendars, right? Not just for kids anymore.
Absolutely. And, beyond the chocolate or those little gifts, the calendars can be a really good reminder to slow down and enjoy the little things leading up to Christmas, It's about gratitude and appreciating the anticipation.
It's like a built-in mindfulness practice for the holidays.
Precisely. And I think we could all use a bit more mindfulness, especially during this time of year when things can get a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
So as we're thinking about embracing the spirit of Advent today, maybe it's about finding these small rituals.
Okay.
Little things that can help us stay grounded and connected to what this season really means.
I like that. So it's not about big gestures or making drastic changes.
Right.
It's more about those subtle shifts. Perspective, intention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about making space for reflection even when everything's super busy. Maybe you light a candle every night and take a few moments to think about hope, peace, joy, and love. Or maybe try adding a small act of kindness into your day.
I love that idea. Even small acts of kindness can make such a difference, not only for the person receiving it, but also for the person giving it.
Absolutely.
It's a way to really embody the spirit of Advent, in a tangible way.
Right. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. Maybe you give someone a genuine compliment, or you offer to help with groceries, or maybe you just listen to a friend who needs to talk. Simple things can have a huge impact.
They really can. And those acts of kindness tie back to that sense of community we talked about earlier.
Right.
Recognizing we're all connected and showing compassion.
Absolutely. In a world that often feels divided, that message of unity and compassion is more important than ever.
It really is. As we're talking, I'm realizing that the spirit of Advent is all about embracing those values that go beyond any specific holiday or belief system. It's about hope, peace, joy, acting with love.
You said that perfectly. Those values are something we should all aim for, not just during the holidays, but all the time.
I'm feeling so inspired. I'm ready to embrace the rest of Advent. But before we move on, I have a question. How do you personally bring the spirit of Advent into your life? Like, what rituals or practices resonate with you?
That's a great question. For me, it often comes down to finding those quiet moments, even when things are crazy. I love taking walks in nature, even when it's cold outside.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Just appreciating the stillness and beauty of nature. It's like a reset button for my mind and soul.
There's something so grounding about being in nature, especially when everything else is hectic.
Totally agree. And I also find that journaling can be really helpful during Advent. Just taking a few minutes each day to reflect on things, processing thoughts and emotions, connecting with my inner self, and setting intentions.
Yeah, makes sense. And it doesn't have to be anything formal, just writing down what you're grateful for, what you're hoping for, or what you're committed to.
Exactly, creating that space for intention. Another thing I found meaningful is getting involved in acts of service. Volunteering, donating to causes, or just helping someone out.
It's amazing how acts of service, big or small, not only affect others, but also give us a sense of purpose.
It's so true, and I think that's a key part of Advent, understanding that we're all interconnected and that what we do, even the little things, can make a difference.
So as we move towards the end of Advent, it's important to remember that it's not just about counting down the days until Christmas. It's about holding on to that sense of anticipation, reflection, and connection.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a journey we're all on together. Let's keep supporting and inspiring each other as we go through this season with intention and grace.
Okay, I'm feeling ready for the rest of Advent now. But before we wrap this up, I have one last question for you. What's one thing you wish more people understood about the true meaning of Advent?
That's a good one. I think with all the rushing around, what people often forget is that Advent is about preparing our hearts for something truly special.
Okay.
It's not just about the gifts or the parties. It's about cultivating that sense of wonder, hope, and being open to the possibility of change.
It's like we're all on this journey of preparing our hearts for something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And that preparation can take many forms. It might be taking some time for quiet reflection, connecting with loved ones, or showing kindness and generosity.
So it's about embracing those little everyday acts of transformation, right?
Yeah.
The ones that lead to a deeper connection with ourselves and the world.
Exactly. And it's not about checking things off a to-do list. It's about approaching every day with intention and being open to the unexpected things this season can bring.
That's a great way to think about it. I think this is a perfect segue to our last segment.
Yeah.
Where we can discuss some of those unexpected gifts and figure out how to keep that Advent spirit alive, even after the holidays. It's funny because you said Advent is about getting ready for something extraordinary. And we always think of those big changes, But maybe it's those small moments that really make a difference.
I think you're right. It's those little moments of grace and connection that really change us.
It's like we're each creating our own Advent tapestry, right? Like thread by thread. Each moment adds to the beauty of the whole thing. Whether it's quiet time, an act of generosity, or even just a good conversation with someone.
I like that. It reminds us that Advent isn't just about getting to Christmas Day, it's about the journey. It's about opening ourselves up to new possibilities and letting the spirit of the season transform us.
So even though Advent is almost over, that feeling of anticipation and reflection and connection, we can keep that going, like all year.
Absolutely. Advent is like practice for our hearts. It reminds us that even when life gets crazy, there's always room for hope, peace, joy, and love.
Okay, we've talked about a lot, the history of Advent, those surprising facts, and how to bring its meaning into our lives today. But I have one last question for you, kind of a big one.
Okay, sure.
What if we took away all the commercial stuff, the pressure, all those expectations? Like, what if we got to the heart of Advent? What would that even look like?
That's a great question. I think at the core of it all, it would be this deep sense of longing.
Longing.
Yeah, like wanting something more. Something that connects us to what it means to be human.
Like a need for connection, meaning, something more than just the material stuff.
Exactly. Under all those layers of tradition and celebration, even the commercial stuff, there's this human desire for something that truly feeds our soul. And that's something we should always be searching for, not just during Advent.
That's a great point. I think that's a perfect way to end this.
Yeah.
It's a reminder to keep searching and exploring, to keep that hope alive. So we've really dug deep into Advent today. We've gone beyond the surface.
We have.
But even more importantly, we've looked at what it truly means. A time for anticipation, reflection, and connecting to something bigger than ourselves.
And you never know, maybe by rediscovering the true spirit of Advent, we might even rediscover something about ourselves along the way.
I like that. Well, thank you for diving deep with us today. We hope you learned something new and feel ready to celebrate the rest of this special season.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.